Guys, I'm going to tell you, that is a ultimate superpower. It will make you one of the rarest men on this planet, because the more men I talk to, the more I realize how rare that is.
The Tony Bova Show, built by pain, designed for freedom.
Welcome to the Tony Bova Podcast, where you are relentless by design. In today's episode, I want to talk about the unfair advantage that no man is talking about. And in this particular episode, I'm going to give you the two truths that you have to start to understand and the three things that you need to be able to do to become this type of man that nobody's talking about, nobody knows exists. And before I do that, I will dive into a little bit of a story around how I discovered this in myself and how I want to be bringing this to other men, why this podcast even exists, why I'm out here delivering this message so that you can become that version of yourself that you know you're capable of becoming. So the unfair advantage that no one is talking about is the ability to do these two different things. And one of these things is to be really masculine in nature, because in today's society, we have been struck in with a different type of narrative that we haven't experienced for the last several decades. And this narrative has been depleting masculinity, where it's become toxic. It has become this thing that is taboo. To have any type of opinion as a man is actually looked down upon, and that we need to start to placate. Being masculine in itself is a gift. Being able to protect your family, to be able to provide for something, to be driven into a mission is so critically important for us, where we have the ability to separate ourselves from our emotions in particular moments so that when duty calls for us, we have the ability to make the decisions that protect and keep everybody safe. That is the true definition of leadership, is I risk carrying the things that you don't want to carry and keep you from them so that you can live in your life in a way that suits who you are. That's what we do for our families. That's what we do for our businesses. And that's what we do in our professions. And it's also what we do with different types of pieces of meaning that we come along in life. The other one is one that we're not very used to. And this is being deeply connected and understanding our emotions. Now, I want to make sure I frame this properly for you so that you don't see this as something that's too soft, because I'm going to challenge you to recognize that our emotions actually can be a superpower if we start to figure out and see them very dynamically so that we can connect deeper to ourselves and the people we care most about. Because when we are faced with emotions, what that gives us the ability to do is to feel. And when feeling is connection, and when we can connect, our energy can increase, our frequency can increase, and we have the ability to be more fully fulfilled in our lives in the way that we were designed. So before I jump into this, how I started to recognize I had this unfair advantage was right after my breakup with my son's mother. And it was a very toxic relationship where there was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of blaming, defensiveness, and a lot of different manipulative and difficult types of dynamics that were happening between her and I. I'm not going to get into the whole story of that right now. I'm sure that will progress as you get to learn me in the new episodes that come out. But at the end of it, the story that she had told me throughout that was that no woman was going to love me, that I had a divorce, that I had children with multiple different women, and that at the end of it, I was lucky to be in a type of a relationship. And so when I stepped out into the dating world for the first time, really the first time in my life, because I didn't really date when I was younger in my 20s, I was totally surprised by the responses I was getting from women. Because what they were seeing was someone that had held a very masculine job, somebody that had very strong masculine energy, but also the ability to see them, to connect with them, and to be able to be in touch with his emotions. I want to scare you off with the emotional piece, that you have to frame that or look at that like women look at it. But when we are understanding our emotions and we're connecting to our feelings, it's so different that whether you want to believe it or not, most men today they believe that a woman wants somebody that's 6 feet tall, that's making an exorbitant amount of money and is handsome and doesn't share his emotions and all these different components. And I will say there are some truths to those components, but that's not the whole truth. See, women will often invest in a man that is very connected to himself, his meaning, his purpose, and his vision. And so those external things, what they speak to her is he has the ability to protect and provide for her. It doesn't necessarily mean that a woman won't commit or fully invest in you if you don't have those things. It means that you have to have the energy and the confidence to be able to provide those types of things. And at the end of it, women that are, I want to say, at a different classification, actually want men that are connected to their emotions. They just don't want them to emotionally dump on them. And we will talk about that in another episode. But the emotional piece, they actually truly want to be connected to because they're creatures of feeling and emotion, that they want to be able to connect with you in that fashion, that deeply. And when I was going through like my dating cycle, I found that was an edge I had. And I didn't really fully understand it until I got a mentor a couple years later who started to really identify and give me the pieces and the framework of why that was so different. Where he started to give me key pieces of information and insight about myself that I started to understand how relating to women was very different and not what the surface level knowledge and basis of what men were believing and thinking, whether it was a red pill space or whether it was, hey, be vulnerable and get in touch with your emotions. It was very different than that, where I was able to separate the emotional components and still connect to the emotional pieces. And later on, we're going to talk about those 3 components and how you do that. But as I was getting mentored, and I started to connect those pieces of knowledge, I started to see how I was elevating who I wasn't showing up as, who I would be on dates, and the confidence and what that spoke to women, and how I started to find a different classification of woman, a woman that was highly feminine, a woman that was highly mature, a woman that had the ability to hold space for her own emotions. And as I progressed myself in my growth and my journey, I was able to draw into Sabrina, who, in my opinion, is one of the highest classes of women that you can attract in. That she is exciting and fun and spontaneous. She's beautiful. She is intelligent and smart, and she's deeply connected to herself, and she has the ability to not make everything my fault. That I have the freedom that all men crave and want in a relationship, because it's not about just attracting her in, it's about having that long-term relationship. And it was funny because I was just speaking to one of my clients last night about this, how he is developing into this type of rare man, how he has the ability to start to connect these masculine pieces and also connect to the emotional piece, because it's so rare that when a woman actually sees it and she feels it, she has no other way other than to react into it, where she leans into it and she's drawn in, where she's attracted to you and she can't even explain it. As he's been developing this and he's starting to see this happen for him in his own life, it really started to bring this full picture for me. This full picture that, how I started with my mentor, how I noticed some things about myself, and then it sort of started with my mentor and how he highlighted things that were critically different about me and my own journey, and how I'm passing that along. And how when we have more men that are in this rare classification, how that will shift the trajectory of society, which is the 3 things that I want to lead you into, that you need to know, that you have to have the ability to start to be one of these types of men. Your first thing is you have to have the ability without guilt to say no. You have to say no to the things that aren't true for you, that they don't align for you, or you take the time necessary to make the decision. David Data, in his book, The Way of the Superior Man, he talks about not making decisions based upon a woman's opinion. That you can make a decision based on what she gives you for information, and that's really critical for us to pay attention to. But that when we give her the responsibility of the choice, like, well, she made me or she told me to do this, then what we're doing is we're blaming her for the moments that things go wrong. And then what that does is that creates a break in the polarity between the two of you. And so you can certainly take her observations, her opinions into account, but that you must make the choice of the answer if it's a yes or no, and that you fully own that, because that's going to protect your relationship. That's going to protect not just your relationship with her, but your relationships with your friends, with your relationships as you continue to level up, your relationships professionally and within business and within your purpose and your meaning. The second thing I want to bring to your attention is your ability to sit with your own emotions and not become needy and have to dump them or fill your space up with productivity. You see, we do one of two things, because as men, we can be very black and white, and black and white is rule-based. And what we'll do is we'll either push off our emotions, we'll fill our space with productivity, or we'll wallow in it and we will start to push on our emotions to others, become victim mindseted and to blame others for the things that are happening in our lives and not fully taking responsibility for them, not knowing that we have the ability to shift our entire reality just simply based on our decisions and our viewpoint. When we start to have the ability to separate and sit with the emotion, it allows you to do something that no man is doing today. It allows you the ability to connect with yourself and give yourself the things that you need in order to show up differently for your relationships, for your meaning, for your purpose, and for your profession and your business. That is a complete superpower. The third thing I want to talk to you about is being able to connect these two things together will make you one of the rarest men to walk this planet. Because it is so difficult for us to be able to hold emotions and also say no without guilt. You see, what I've found as I've been working with the men I've worked with is that when it comes to breakups, and why it's so hard for men to leave women, is because when we leave them, when we're saying, I can't be with you any longer, what we struggle with is that what is going to happen to her after I left her? You see, I know that there's a lot of struggle with women leaving men right now. And in some regard, you have to see it as she's leaving your sphere of protection. She's leaving what you have to offer her energetically, physically, emotionally, and financially. And when she does that, it becomes very easy for us to disconnect that responsibility because she's the one that chose to leave. But if we choose to leave, what ends up happening is we get concerned, and this is why we get stuck in those relational toxic cycles where it's back and forth, and we always let her back in, is because what happens to her if she actually fully went on her own? And if you were to link it back to biological or primal instinctual patterns from historic evolution of man and woman, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, if a woman left a man, she'd be left to die because she did need a man to protect her. And because today's society has become so safe, and because the women have the ability to protect and provide for themselves within a safe society, they no longer need men in that capacity, in that immediate life or death physical sense. But that doesn't mean that our DNA hasn't changed to that point yet, that we've evolved our DNA and our instincts and our emotions to the point where we understand that inside of our own bodies. So it feels like when we leave her that we're going against the thing that we committed to from the beginning, because as soon as we chose her, what we said to her was, I'm willing to pay a sacrifice of death for you. And I know not all men are going to connect with that, but the men that connect to it from a masculine standpoint, that want to be protectors, that want to be providers, are going to completely understand this component, that I would be willing to step in front of danger for you so that our lineage can continue to live on. So as we start to see these three things, and then the third one really connecting these two together, where you're able to carry these two truths. You're able to be a masculine man, a man that is strong and firm and has direction and has purpose, has the ability to move forward and make hard choices, be challenged and not get thrown off course when things get difficult, and the ability to be a man that is connected and understands his own emotions. Guys, I'm going to tell you, that is a ultimate superpower. It will make you one of the rarest men on this planet because the more men I talk to, the more I realize how rare that is. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope that it really resonated with you. I hope that you connected to it and you got a lot of value out of it. And I want to remind you that you're built by pain and you were designed for freedom.